Hey Eric,
Hello.
how are you going this week?
Good. I finally did something productive. I got a PR out finally.
Yay!
Yeah, it's always exciting. And it breaks everything, which is great. So hopefully there was nobody that was truly committed to version 0.2.0 or
Which version
whatever.
are we update? Is it the configuration version?
I made changes. What did I make changes to? I made changes to like everything. Um, I think the biggest changes, I changed what gets returned by the web server. So for anybody who wrote or did some their own Rego things, that'll break. I think that's the only thing I really broke that somebody would have done already.
So even in the non-pass, I think I saw some code removal around the is valid and invalid, like append that string. So even in the non-pass-through mode, we don't return those anymore, right?
We do not, no. So in all modes, pass through or not, we return the entire validation structure. And the default policy that I set up looks at the overall success value. So the only really delta between, we could, like, if people, Teja brought up some concern about the size of the response. And so if we wanted to, we could configure it so that we if we're not in pass-through mode, we only send as success, and we like null out the verify reports to save space. Because right now the only difference between pass-through and normal mode is if you set any kind of policy stuff and in Ratify, pass-through will ignore it. So it just won't short circuit any of the verifiers. It will always do all of them. So that's the only delta today. So I could, if people have strong feelings, I could update that so that we return the same format of data in both cases, but we only return the verifier reports for pass-through.
Yeah. We'll talk about it once everyone is here. So I see Nathan is here. Yeah, we'll give it a couple of more minutes for everyone to show up. I know Sajay is out this week, I think.
Oh, gotcha. I also started looking at our at how Gatekeeper does their documentation with like Docusaurus, their like website, because I was like, that's a nice thing that makes it so that people want to use your thing, you know? Like if a project has a website with documentation, at least in my case, I'm like far more likely to try to figure something out than if they just have a folder full of docs. Like, so.
Yeah, I wonder if we can just like publish our docs under like GitHub pages. Like in the GitHub pages, you can just configure where are your documentation. I think you can just specify the directory.
So the way that I think it works is you make a branch called GH pages typically, and you publish the like artifacts of your stuff to there, and then you have like ratify.github.io or whatever would link to our thing. But there's also a way that you can set up our domain to point to the GitHub pages. So that would probably be my vote.
I think that's how our charts work today. I have to look at the README again, but we're pointing to the static page for our charts.
Yeah.
Okay, let me share the agenda screen. Oh, I think, Eric, since you are first on the agenda, do you want to go through the set of changes you have? Because once you're in control, like, you know, all the scrolling and
Sure.
stuff. Better.
Yep, sure.
Let me make you the host. And or make host. Page host Eric.
All right, so let me see. So I'll pick this screen. Go gadget desktop. Okay, can people see this?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'll try to, let me see if I can blow this up anymore. So it's more legible. Okay, so this is the long-awaited, I've had this in my queue for a while. So pass-through execution mode. So essentially the high-level overview of this change is we ignore policy decisions within Ratify. So currently, policy decisions will affect the overall is success value for the return. And it will also affect whether you short circuit when evaluating artifacts. And so this mode will set the overall is success to true always, and then it will not short circuit. So it will process every verifier for every artifact in the registry, and it will append all of those results, and all of those end up getting bubbled back up to or replied to the request. And the other thing I've added as part of that is I've modified the way that verifiers actually return data, and I've added an extensions field. And that field is so that verifiers can add whatever metadata might be relevant when you want to evaluate that response in Rego. And then I added some initial policies that we can look at. So let me see, I think probably the most interesting one that people can take a read through. So I added this document that goes over some background about Rego and how you could go about getting data from the external data provider in your Rego, and then what the response will look like. So for example, this is a example response in here. When you call Ratify for a particular image, what you might get back. So hopefully this can give people an idea of how they can write their Rego policies, to look for particular verifiers, I need to make sure that there is a notary verifier that is successful and that was validated using this particular issuer.
So the the use case for this is that we're going to bypass Ratify, or at least the verification piece. And then is this so that folks can replace the verification piece? I mean, so right there where it says verifier reports is success, does that mean that it's verified, or that just means that it went through that?
So Ratify today essentially goes through all of these artifacts and all of these verifiers and performs a validation. And then each of these individually has some success criteria.
So the top is success is for the overall, and then each one of those has its own is success.
Yes. So within Ratify, we introduced some like policy light, which is like, oh, for this artifact type, all references need to be successfully validated, or any reference needs to be successfully validated. And then we used is success at the top level to indicate that that policy as defined within Ratify was met.
Okay. So the reason I ask is that they could, inside Gatekeeper, they could decide, I'm just going to go off of the top is success, or they could like go down through one of the individuals and say, well, I'm really just worried about this one, and if it is success. Or they could actually go off of looking at an extensions or something and looking at the issue or whatever. So it's not like they could basically do whatever they want at that point, is what you're saying here. We're no longer going to have Ratify be the gatekeeper, so to speak.
Yeah, yes. So there is essentially no policy. And what we mean by that is not that verifiers aren't run. We just mean that we're not going to decide within Ratify if this one is successful and this one fails, then the overall is a failure or is still successful. We're going to defer all of that decision to the policy and gatekeepers. So you
Okay.
could say, oh, for all of the notary v2, if I find when you receive this response payload from the external data provider, you might write a policy that says all of the verifiers for notary v2 need to be successful.
Okay.
So
Only when the pass-through
that's
mode is enabled, right?
yes. Yeah. So one thing so right now, as this PR exists, this is the payload that now comes back from external data requests always. The only difference between pass-through and default mode is in default mode, the top level is success will depend on the policy that you have initialized in Ratify, and you might short circuit the verifiers that you run if you end up, like, for example, in Ratify, if you have some artifact type set to all and one of them fails and it's like the second out of 10, you won't even process the remaining 8. So that's in default mode. And so that's the difference right now. And because of that, if there's I know that there was concerns with the payload size. So for default mode, we could even empty out verifier reports, since the only thing you would technically consider is this top level anyways. But this is as it exists right now.
So if we emptied out verifier reports, would this data be anywhere else that they could look at? I mean, I guess in the logs, or it's just gone?
It does get the Ratify pod does log the response, but you'd have to essentially go tail this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so that was the motivation of putting it here, was that it's very easy. Then it's it's directly handed to your policy, and so this just talks a little bit more about the fields that you can expect to find in this structure for each verifier. And it might be good later on to cover them in more depth, but down here at the bottom is an example of this Notary v2 issuer validation policy. So this is the policy that I was talking about, where you want to make sure that an image is signed by a certificate from a particular issuer. So, you make your external data call, and then we iteratively build our potential violations. The other nice thing about this change is it split. Before, we just had that valid invalid response. This actually splits the possible violations by error per image or system error, and then provides you that information back instead of just the payload. So this,
given how, looking at this right now, given how Gatekeeper or I should say OPA works in general, these are all OR conditions, right? So so if one of the general violations happens, then it's basically doesn't pass?
Right. If any of the general violation functions based on this, so Gatekeeper's using this, and inside of this, we're using this rule. And so if any of these general violation ones return a result, then it will get blocked.
Okay.
And more than one general violation can also return.
But if we wanted, I mean, this is just a sample policy, right? So if we wanted to, I mean, if they wanted to, anybody, we could basically, instead of using OR conditions with repeating the general violation, we could go in there and within a single general violation, use AND logic to, put these together. If this one and this one failed, then I want to fail.
Right. Yeah. So this is to give an idea of and this was a general, when I was looking at just the Gatekeeper library, this was a general pattern that I saw. So I used it here as well with this overloading essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So these ones just check for errors, either system errors or errors returned by the verifier or by the provider. And then let's see, we check to make sure, let's see, is success. So we make sure to check if the success criteria, the overall, is true. And then we check to make sure that there is a notary V2 verifier result for our issuer. So there needs to be at least one, and then this one it needs to be successful. So this is, I think, the policy that some of the Microsoft people have been asking about, where they give a demo and they're like, oh, see, this one's signed and it gets deployed, and this one's unsigned, and so it doesn't get deployed. With our initial demo, it actually is just not getting deployed because there's no verifier results. But now with this policy, it will actually get rejected because it is not signed. It doesn't have a signature from that issuer. So anyways, example policy there. And then I did provide, I started this library directory, and then I provided a default policy that works the same way that our original policy worked, but just based on the new interface. This policy for the issuer validation, and then just a basic policy for SBOM validation. So that is the major changes. And then let me see, I have a demonstration. So let's see if I can get this to work. So I don't know how legible this is. Let's see if I can blow this up.
Are you in GoLand or are you in?
Yeah, I'm in GoLand. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. You got to go up to settings, like the gear on the top right, or preferences maybe, but you have to edit the default font or the font size in the default editor or whatever.
So I see.
It doesn't have the same keystrokes as VS Code.
I see. Okay. I guess then I could open this elsewhere. Is this legible?
I can read it, but I don't know.
Okay. So anyways, this is just to give an idea of how this pass-through mode works. So I have these two containers. I have on my local machine, I have this net monitor one that has a signature. And then I have this one that doesn't have a signature. And this the certificate here uses this issuer. So I have taken that issuer, and then this is the template, the policy template for issuer validation that we just looked at. So this is the same. And then here you can see that it accepts a string as when you're defining the constraint. So then when I create my constraint here, I say, if a pod gets deployed into the default namespace, it should use this notary v2 issuer validation, and then my issuer is this. So let's see if I can borrow my terminal window here and put this over the top of this. Okay, wonderful. So let's see. So first, I have my local provider, and I'm running this. So this local provider is just set up to reach out to my local host. So I'm not actually running Ratify within the container. I'm just running it here, and then I can apply this template. Ratify is running. So then my constraint that we saw here, and that should go. And so this pod is that only SPDX pod. So here you can see this one has an error, has no signatures for certificate with issuer because it's looking for that issuer in my policy. And then if I deploy my pod that is signed with that certificate, that issuer, it works. So
very nice.
So that's all in the PR. And like, oh yeah, like I was saying, Jimmy, so you can see here, these are the logs. So you'd see this in the container as well. So technically technically, yeah, it is there, but you'd have to have something go out and find it. Cool. Well, let me see. How do I stop my screen share? Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Thanks for the demo, Eric. I will take a look, and I think Akash, could you take a look as well? I think there's some updates in logic with the short circuit and the like ignoring the policy for in the pass-through mode. Yeah,
Sure.
we'll
Yep.
take a look.
I'll take a look. Yep. Thanks, Eric.
Cool. And how do I give this back?
I
did you
can
take-
reclaim it.
Okay,
Does
cool.
anyone else have any feedback on the pass-through mode?
I had one question. So the default will be non-pass-through. It'll still send the pass-through payload, but it's going to default to the policies that are in the verifiers, right?
Yes. So in our configuration file, we have those config policies where you see artifact verification policies, where like cosine v1 or application vend ratify spdx, and then you see like all or any. So in default mode, it will honor those settings.
And then in pass-through mode, it's going to do what you just showed.
Yeah, it'll just every artifact that it gets from the registry, it will pass or fail. It will keep going until it runs out of artifacts.
Yep, that's really cool. And have you did any performance on it yet to see how long it's taking? Any
I
appreciable
have-
difference?
I haven't, but at least from the performance tests that I've run, I probably wouldn't see a big difference, because it's like, unless you're testing a case where you are short circuiting on a large number of artifacts, then you probably wouldn't see a huge delta.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
I would
yeah.
assume that when this goes live or goes GA, I think we're going to slowly move into multiple artifacts, multiple signatures, that type of thing. But
Yeah, there has been talks, like for Microsoft, they want to append the vulnerability reports into the registry, and they just want to keep doing that. And so if they're scanning stuff on a daily or weekly basis, then the size of the artifact pool will get really, really big, and we'll probably have to talk about maybe instead of worrying about policies like verification policies, we need to worry about like tree pruning policies, which is like, oh yeah, only take only validate the latest of this type of artifact or something like that.
yeah, cool. Oh, did we lose Susan?
Uh-oh. I was gonna say, did I lose everybody?
No, I was wondering, I was looking to see who froze, but I think it was Susan, right? Did you have to get off and get back in?
Yeah, so I
so-
actually had the same issue last week. As soon as I start sharing screen, my Zoom just crashed. So Eric, you will have to screen share today. And I'll try to
Okay.
figure out what's going on with Windows with Zoom.
Sure. So let's see. So okay, where's my screen share? Oh. So let's see. And then we had the work in progress PR first, Susan. Oh, do you want me to? I'm not the host anymore.
Oh, okay, let me make you the host again.
Cool. All right, let's share this. Cool. Try to put this up here. Cool. So that was this review. So
Yep.
do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, I just want to quickly run through the design doc changes. If you see in the description, there's a link to the design doc. Could you click on that? Thank you. So I'm still going through this PR. I've I was able to test the local scenario where I modify a file and see the executor reload successfully. And for the in cluster scenario, Eric, if you scroll down, I described that there's like a different code path. So if you go down to the configuration file manager, yeah, right here, be great. So like when I'm testing the in cluster scenario, like when I tried to update the config, what actually happened was the configuration file that was mounted got deleted and then recreated. So my current implementation is to watch for the configuration file. If it get deleted, start like a polling thing every second. And then once I find out that this file exists again, load the executor and add the file watcher back. Does that sound like a reasonable approach?
I think that seems, given how they do it, it seems reasonable. The only other thing I could think about if we wanted to be fancier was if there was something where we could query like the API server for those changes. But
Where's this file being written?
Yeah, it's Eric, can you bring up the where we do the volume mount? I think it's in deployment YAML.
Oh, okay. So
yeah,
it's being written to a persistent volume on a node, and then I'm just trying to understand what all the mechanisms that are involved in it. So this would
so we have
on the kubelet and the API server, right?
yeah, so we just have the Docker or our Ratify configuration JSON and a config map, and then that config map gets mounted into the deployment. So that ends up here. Yeah.
So this is the one that Lee wants to change to a CRD. Is that it, or is that something else?
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. So essentially, like it within this config.json, like essentially, if you want to add a verifier, for example, you would have to come into this config map and edit the JSON payload and add it here. So part of Lee's proposal was taking all of these individual things like this guy, Notary 2, and having a CRD so that you can add or remove a verifier like this via like the K8s objects.
Yeah, so we're saying the step one is to support dynamic configuration update through file watcher, and then in the future we will have CRDs for the verifier and store. I think that's Lee's proposal. But then Eric mentioned there was like some limitation. What was there?
To
converting
which
CRD,
approaches?
I remember we deprioritized CRDs.
Yeah, part of Lee's proposal had to do specifically with namespacing the stuff that you would configure for Ratify, and within Ratify we don't have. I mean, today there's no support for that kind of thing. Like there's assumption that there's one and only one configuration. So that's a issue. And it's not an issue, but the other like it will be a lot of work to introduce support for CRDs, because there's a lot of like scaffolding that we'd have to add to support like for a cube builder, for example, to be able to support working with the CRDs. And for us, we would need to do like subscribe to changes to CRDs while also furnishing our REST API. Like in Gatekeeper's case, they just use Cube Builder, but they only listen to CRD definitions and then just sit there and on an audit loop. So we just have to make sure that we do that effectively and be able to share that shared resource would be all of these verifiers between the RESTful API and the subscription to the API server.
So CRD is still on our roadmap, even without the namespace, we can implement that.
Yeah, so we could start out by implementing it without namespacing support. From a end user perspective, the only change would be adding a field for the namespace to their definition. And from our end, that will entail a whole bunch of stuff. Like we need to, support storing multiple of these configurations. We need to support, we need to change up the interface with Gatekeeper to have that namespace passed to us, etc. So this was the short term, like we can get a win with this, and it pretty closely follows the implementation we have today.
Yeah, the other question, Eric, is so I've tested the config map update. Is there any other common ways to update the configuration file in the in-cluster environment?
I mean, that's probably the most common. You could, like, there are technically other approaches, like you could flex mount, like you could host path mount it from the host. you could mount it from an Azure file storage or a cloud like block storage. But I would probably say for like configuration, that's less common. Like config map's probably the most, like the biggest thing we should test.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. It's especially that's how our default template behaves. So that'll be the number one to address.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other question I have is if you scroll up to the verify subject method signature. So yeah, we talked, yeah, right here. Yeah. So we talked about like having the mutex and make sure we lock the object and like the verifiers in the store during verification. So my initial implementation was updating the signature to the receiving pointer or a receiver pointer. Like at the moment it's executor and struct executor, right? But not having the star creates a copy of the executor, so we're not updating the log properly. But I think the signature was implemented like this without the pointer to make sure the verify method does not have any capability of changing the executor. So my current implementation relies on the caller of verify subject to lock it properly. So like in any code path where we are having like a file watcher thing that could potentially update the executor, we'll have to lock it. But in CMD, like command line scenarios, we're just doing like a one-time verification and we're not watching the configuration file. There's no need to lock. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, it sounds reasonable. Yeah, I guess my knee jerk is like trusting the caller to to manage the synchronization of this object is risky.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Is there a way we can let the verify method lock it, but not change the configuration of the executor?
I mean, we could enforce within, because this verify subject is a member function of executor. So are you suggesting that for future implementations of or potential other implementations of executor, we would want to hold this? Or are you concerned with somebody like on our team making this modification? Because this, like, at least as far as I'm concerned, this seems like we would have to accept the change to ratify internals that violated this principle that we don't modify the executor within this function.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would kind of lean towards, at least like for now, that's a safe assumption since we are the stewards of this internal code.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm happy to change it to executor star and just leave a note like, don't change the verifier
Don't
function. The verifying method should not modify the executor.
don't hurt the executor. Okay. I mean, that seems reasonable. Yeah, I was part of what I was running into is like a pointer thing as well. So
Yeah.
like this is the only pointer that we have in the executor. And I started using it more because like there's only one other field in here. And so I still need to go through and test some stuff because I started referencing this and realized, oh, there's some code paths that don't initialize this at all in the executor. And so it's getting null reference errors. So I don't know if we need to worry about that anywhere, but that would be the one other thing that I'd think about. I think for executor, it's probably safe because you can't really do much of anything without having a non-nil executor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all the major points here. So yeah, I'll probably add an end-to-end test for this. Yeah, and I'll ping everyone for review once I'm ready.
Cool. Nice. As part of my PR, since I do update the README and the chart, I forgot to mention one of the changes that I did was I removed I think there was a lot of confusion with like some of our Microsoft people installing this chart, and it ships with a template, and then we tell you to go install a constraint, and then I sort of think it's a better approach to give to sales pitch this as like, okay, you install Ratify, but then you got to install the templates and the constraints separately because they are custom. Because there was some people who were like, well, how come it doesn't do blah, or how come it doesn't do blah? And I think the original intent is that this policy that we were shipping as part of the chart was not really a production policy. It was just like made the quick start work. So I removed that, and now the same, like in spirit, the same policy exists in our library, but the quick start tells you have to install that separately. So our chart now ships with no templates. And if you want Ratify to do something cool, you need to install something from the library or write your own.
Yeah. Didn't we have the install template or apply template step as well before?
We had the apply constraint. So we had the constraint separate, and that's because Helm won't let you order the artifacts that it installs. And so we couldn't get Helm to wait to deploy the constraint before until after the template was deployed. So we just put the template directly in the chart, which is not good. So I removed that, and then that other random chart that had the constraint in it is also gone because it only existed to be a vessel to hold the demo constraint.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll review the get quick start steps as well. So from what you said, there's now a step to install the template as well.
Yeah, now instead of 2 steps, Helm install Ratify, Helm install or kubectl apply constraint, it's Helm install Ratify, and then you kube apply the template, and then you kube apply the constraint.
Yep. Sounds good.
I've decreased customer efficiency by 30% some percent. Womp womp.
Yeah, but I think Lynn's knowing what you're installing, and it's clearer.
Yeah, now it's definitely chunked up. Cool.
Yeah.
So do you want to do this?
Yeah. So I we had someone from other region proposing to have some occurrences of meeting in the morning. So I kind of looked at there's plenty of ads on this page. Acting. So I looked at the CNCF public events, and they have some openings around Tuesday morning, 9 to 10 and 10 to 11. There's some other meetings that happens fortnightly. I've made a note of it in the weekly meeting. So my proposal is we'll keep this current time for like the first week and the third week of the month, and we'll do the every other week with this new proposed time, whatever like people work for. So I've put in the 9 to 10. I made a table of all the conversion.
I like it. I need the table. It helps. But yeah, because now I can look at this and be like, oh, because I was like, oh, 9 sounds great, and I was like, ooh, that probably doesn't sound so good.
Yeah. So I'm hoping this time is good for Bin Bin, and so like the contributors can at least attend one meeting every other week. And maybe Jimmy have like a preference for maybe 4 p.m. instead of 7.
I'm like I said before, I'm open to whenever. I mean, this is the only meeting that I have at 7 o'clock in the evening all week, so it's not that terrible for me. So whatever you guys decide, I will make it work.
Cool. Thanks for that. So I will send this to Lee and Alex. Is it Alexandra? Do you remember, Eric, who was
Yeah,
involved?
Alessandro.
Yeah, Alessandro came.
Yeah, if you have his alias, can you send it to me, Eric? Then I'll ping them.
I think I found it at one time, so I'll have to go because I was curious who that was too, and I think they only put Alessandro in the notes, so I had to like scrub through the recording until his like alias showed up on the screen from talking, and I was like, oh, now so I'll have to see if I find that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know how the doodle poll works. I'm imagining if everyone just visited that link and then you put in your email address and you put in like what your preference is. And I'll who else should we send this to? I think I'll send it to Teja, and I will send it to Sajay because he's got like a few conflicts during this 4 p.m. time as well. So, and then we'll go from there once everyone's result is in. And feel free, do you have any other proposed times, Eric? Like the CNCF calendar is from 10 to 12 is booked every day. Like every day is like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But every afternoon is free. Like there's no meetings in the afternoon. Like I imagine to work for some time zones, or people prefer like morning meetings over afternoon meetings. But their afternoons are pretty.
I mean, I think at least for me, I think the ones that exist here are reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like if anyone have any other proposed time, just leave a note in the meeting and I can add it in the poll. Yep. Yeah, that's everything on our agenda today. Jimmy, do you have any? I know you were working on the walkthrough, not the walkthrough, sorry, the alt provider. You did the walkthrough last week.
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
No, I don't think I have any questions. I mean, I'm just writing the test today. I don't think that I was writing the test and I was looking at the one that was written, I think by Akash for the Azure workload identity one. And I may not have, it's not going to be the same. It'll be similar, but it won't be the same, obviously. The one thing I wanted to bring up, and I was hoping that Sajay was here, but I guess not. We're running into some issues where it looks like the latest distribution of the ORIS registry and the implementation that we've put in for our AWS ECR is using a later version of the artifact spec. So the short of that is that the CLI and the Go libraries are expecting a specific path for the manifest artifact spec, and that path is not yet updated in the CLI for ORIS, or I don't know if the Go libraries either, but at least the ORIS CLI is not yet updated to the latest artifact spec. Some kind of dead water.
Is this EXT versus ORAS?
This is no, it's like manifest. Let me see if I can find it. It's basically like manifest, the URL where it says V2, so the URL comes out and it says V2, then the repository name, and then it goes into underscore Oris and artifacts refers $digest,
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
So
the
they-
latest way to do it. The Oris
Yes.
CLI has not yet done that. And so it's great that they're using the latest artifact spec in the registries. But there's a milestone that's due out for Oris, and there's no ETA on it. So I don't know when it'll be available. So we're, it's not kind of blocking our testing right now. So I was hoping to get the Oris client, everything working, with my registry, because it was working with the registry. Now it's not. And then I was hoping to get it working with ECR, but the implementation is using the latest artifact spec. So now the Oris client's broken there too. But I wanted to get all that working before I started testing the auth provider to make sure I had a baseline. But yeah, it's not there. So that's kind of, it's a blocker for me right now.
Akash, is the 5 o'clock Oris meeting a community meeting or a internal meeting?
And no, that's an internal meeting, but I think I may have some information for you, Jimmy. So it started breaking probably like a week ago.
Well, so I don't know exactly when it started breaking. What I did was today, yesterday I found out that it wasn't working with ECR. Probably about 3 or 4 days ago is when I heard. And then today I switched to the latest version of the Oris distribution registry, and I saw that it was broken there too. So yeah.
So the latest distribution version that actually supports the new RC1 spec, which is the V2 path. But if you were to default back to the older version, I think it should still work for you.
Yeah, it probably will. It probably will. I mean, the issue I have there is that I could never get the notation client to work in basic auth mode.
I see. Okay.
And folks are looking at it for me, but they just can't seem to reproduce it on what is it, Azure ACR?
Yes. Yeah. On ACR.
So they can't seem to reproduce it on ACR. So I'm kind of, until I can get it working on ECR, then I really don't have a lot to go with. So and ECR is using the latest RC1 spec, so that's where we're at.
Okay.
Akash, do you know what their plan is on the fix?
Yeah, so it's queued up, but it's coming after, I think, the alpha version of Oris v2 gets released. Then they're gonna switch to RC1. So I can bring it up in the internal meeting today. So
yeah, it looks here, it says the milestone is like V14.0 and it's a replacement of V20 alpha 2 or something like that. But anyways, I mean, I can paste the link of what I'm looking at right now. It's the milestone, I guess, that they called out for this.
Okay.
Maybe that'll help reference it in your meeting. So, I mean, the biggest thing is with the Oris registry that I'm using, I can never get notation client to successfully authenticate with basic auth. So my next thing is to make sure that I can at least do it with a notation in the ECR implementation of Oris, but I'm kind of dead in the water.
I see. So this was the same notation error was happening with you on the older version of distribution as well.
Yeah. So I got a link to that too. And I did what I thought was some very specific testing with a lot of results with respect to what I'm seeing, but I'm getting a response back that they can't reproduce it. I guess they cannot reproduce it in ACR. So I don't know what the difference between the Oris distribution registry and the ACR. I don't know what the implementation differences are, but I can't test it against ECR because we've used the latest spec. So I'm kind of dead in the water.
Okay. Okay. I'll surface this issue in our internal meeting. Maybe someone can take a look at it again.
Yeah. I mean, my response basically was, well, I don't know what else to do. And, I can wait until I can get to test it with, our internal ECR, but.
Okay. Okay.
I put some additional information, like it's running in our EKS cluster, in an EKS cluster behind an external facing application load balancer with TLS enabled. I don't know why that would make any difference. It didn't make any difference with ORS or Docker CLIs. So I don't know what the issue is here. But what's his Shui Zhang is looking at it, I guess.
Yeah, I'll talk to Shui. He'll be on the internal meeting too, so
I'll
I'll surface it up to him again.
So cool. All right. Well, that's all I had.
Jimmy, is there a tracking GitHub issue just for the specific thing that's broken?
So it's not really an issue. I opened it up as a notation discussion. So
Okay, got it. We'll use the discussion to track the six.
yeah, that's the second link I put in there.
Yep.
So
Yep. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, Akash, let me know if how Shui respond to this.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
Because we're like Jimmy's blocked. Like let us know if I wonder like if Shui have any suggestion or workaround, how could we communicate to Jimmy directly? Jimmy, are you in the Slack channel? Okay, we don't have a.
I was going to ask the same thing. Or do we have a Slack channel, or did we think about maybe putting one in the Kubernetes space?
Yeah, I think that was our problem. Like we haven't decided our permanent home, and therefore, I think we currently have a private Slack channel. Is that true, Akash?
Yeah, we just have like in the
Internal?
CNCF we have an internal like group chat, so that's not even a
Yeah.
channel.
Oh, okay.
So that doesn't
Yeah.
count. But
Can we
I think,
add Jimmy there?
yeah, I think we should. It would make sense because right now we don't even know which org we want to make the
So
channel
there-
in. So
Yeah, I mean, so you're talking about a Ratify one, right? Because there
Yeah.
is a Notary V2 one that I've been added to, and so I can see Shui and some folks from AWS are there as well.
there's also an ORS one too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can if you haven't joined that one, that's also a good one to join.
Okay, I'll take a look for it. It's in the CNCF one as well.
Let me check. It might not be in the CNCF one. It might be in the OCI one.
I see ORIS, and then I see ORIS artifact spec under CNCF.
Okay, yeah, it's the ORS channel. The ORS artifact spec is the one tracking the switch to the new V2 path and all of those changes. But I think the ORS one is where Shui is more active and has more of the information on discussions on the ORS Go V2. So
Cool. All right, and then one more thing, I guess I should. Last week I had questions around how all the credentialing works and how URSA is going to work to get using a web identity to go after the actual credentials from IAM. And so I verified how it worked, and I actually wrote a blog about it, and I thought I'd share that in case you guys are ever interested in how it works from the AWS perspective with workload identity.
yeah, that's
So-
cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome to read through.
So I'll put that blog there, and it's just using Go SDK for Go V2 just to do some ECR listing. So at least I verified that what I've implemented in the change I'm about ready to submit seems like it will work. I just would like to be able to have a baseline to test it with a client before I try to test it with the auth provider.
Okay.
And I guess another question there would be, I can write tests, for this, the functions in the auth provider, but really a system level test would be necessary because of it having to interface with the actual credential provider inside the cluster.
Yeah, we've been discussing that too because we like to set one up for AKS in Azure too, but there's kind of some stuff we'd have to figure out, like how would we get AWS or Azure credits and accounts and what you'd use for setting up that.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah. And I don't know how it works with Azure, but with IAM and AWS, if you've got a credential already, you can't tell it to go after a web identity credential. It just doesn't work that way. So
I see. Okay.
Okay, well, that's it. That's all I got. Thank you for your help on this.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. Anyone else have additional comment?
One small thing, I think we were talking about this a while ago about splitting the repo. So I think we should do it. So I guess how to do it, I don't know. I guess we'd split it in 2 or 3, maybe in 2, one for the framework and then one for all of the Kubernetes stuff. So all of the constraint templates, maybe the whole library folder that Eric's introducing, and then all the charts, put that into one repo. And then obviously we're gonna have to do some of the dependencies have to be updated, but
Yeah, we could probably take some inspiration from, so auras and notation both have splits where their CLIs are separated from their libraries. And then Gatekeeper has a bunch of different stuff, some of which is more similar to what we provide with the library and the chart. So we could probably borrow some inspiration from those to try to define like a library split and then some extra repos where other stuff can live. I think the only weird thing is, but I think actually I don't know about auras. I know Notation has their own or GitHub org, so it's easy to find all of their repos.
Yep.
Gatekeeper is the same. I think auras has one.
Yep. Auras has Auras project, so they have their own org too. So
yeah. So I mean, personally, I think if we were going to split this into many, it would be ideal for it to live in its own org so that they're all logically grouped instead of having to hunt through random Deus repos to find all of our stuff. So we'll probably have to talk to Sajay to find out if there's anything that we have to do that, or if we can just go out and do it.
yeah, I think Sajay is gonna have to ask Locky for that. So yeah.
I think we can propose a document for proposing how we're going to split the project first, and then once we have agreement, then we can just ask Lucky to create the repositories.
Okay. Yeah,
Sure.
that makes sense.
But yeah, I believe Lee already have an issue tracking this work, so we can use that as a starting thread. Okay, I guess that's everything we have today. Good to see everyone. I hope it gets warmer this week in Seattle, but yeah.
Yeah.
Like the coldest June.
It's
Yes.
cold. Oh, all right.
Yeah. Take
All
care.
right.
everyone.
See you
Have a
guys.
good week.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, I had the end. I was about to end.
No,
I was about to
thanks
end
for
real
sharing
quick.
your screen. I just have
No
to figure out
problem.
why does it crash every time. Like I'm about to take another Windows update, and we'll see if that fixes everything.
Surely it will solve all the problems. So here, I can give this back.
Oh, we can all leave, and the recording will just take care of it, I think.
Okay, cool. Then all right. Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah, see
Bye,
you.
Damien. Bye, Eric.
Bye-bye.